Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be going through my favorite audiobooks. So this is going to be a pretty quick one because it was only last year that I actually started listening to audiobooks, and I think it was actually like this time last year, maybe like end of March actually, I think. And it really changed my reading because I read a lot more now, and sometimes reading an audiobook while actually also physically reading I think really enhances your experience. So there's only 5 on this list because I don't think there's been any audiobooks where I'm like, oh my god, I hate this is the worst, because then I would just like stop listening to it. There's definitely some that I prefer more than others. Like the last one I read was The Last Magician, and it felt like there was like 2 different recordings. One where like the narrator had a cold and was like way quieter, and then and one where they were like talking normally, and like then they were just like cutting it together. I still didn't like hate that. So there hasn't been one that I hate so far, but there's definitely been 5 that I think really stand out as ones that I really loved. And I will also say there's also a couple of audiobooks that I really do want to listen to, like Sadie, for example. I read it physically last year and I've heard the audiobook is just absolutely amazing, so I really want to check that out. Maybe next time I reread Radio Sound. I've also heard the audiobook for that is great. Again, both of them have like podcast elements, so that's probably why they're really great audiobooks. So my first actual recommendation is going to be The Farseer Trilogy by Robin Hobb. I really love the narrator for this. I really should have gone through and like looked up the narrators' names, but like I might do that while I'm editing. I'll try and find who they are. But it's narrated by one person the whole way through, and his voice and the voices he does for everyone else, like everyone else has a different voice, and like there's a lot of characters in these books, so I'm like, how did he remember them all? And especially his voice for Burke. The Farseer Trilogy follows Fitz from when he's young until like his mid-20s-ish, and he's left at the door of the keep. His maternal grandfather like basically tells them, hey, this is like the king in waiting's illegitimate son. I don't want to have to feed him and care for him anymore, so you can do whatever you want. And then the king decides to make him useful and train him up as the assassin. And I found it really difficult to get into this book just because I had read like the only kind of like adult fantasy I think I had read before this was like A Darker Shade of Magic, which V.E. Schwab, I like her writing style, but it is quite straightforward. Whereas this, it's not flowery, but it is definitely more descriptive and a lot denser. And so I was really struggling to get into it. And it was like one of the first audiobooks I listened to on SCRIBD because I could not get through it, and I put it on and I was reading along while I listened to the audiobook, and I fell in love. And I've done this for every single one of Robin Hobb's books. I didn't love the narrator for The Live Ship Traders, but even then I think it really enhances the experience. I think it is the best way to read her books, and it definitely makes you get the most information you can out of it. So I would 100% recommend you read along as you listen to the audiobooks, especially the audiobooks for this. I absolutely adore the narrator for this. So then the next one I'm going to talk about is An Ember in the Ashes by Sabbath Here. So this one actually has multiple narrators. It has one for each of like the main characters' perspectives. So in the first book there's Leah and Elias. Helene, I don't know. She also has a perspective, and this basically follows Leah, whose brother is taken by like the Empire, and Leah goes and finds the resistance and wants their help to save her brother, and they say, we'll help if you act as a spy inside Blackcliff, which is a military academy where Elias is actually training, but he wants to desert, and then their paths cross. I don't adore An Ember in the Ashes series, but the narrators, I love their voices. I will say their voices are very calming. So like I feel like some people might like it because I feel like their voices are very calming, and it can be a very intense story at times, but I love their voices so much, which sounds kind of creepy. But yeah, oh my god, I could just listen to them talk like forever. So I find their voices, they're just really soothing, and they're just really nice to listen to. Like it's the kind of audiobook that I like. Usually I like play a game or like scroll through Twitter or something. Their voices, like I could just listen to them. Like I could just stare at the ceiling and listen. I really love those audiobooks. The next ones I'm going to talk about is the Cassidy Blick Trilogy by Victoria Schwab. I really love the audiobooks for these. I've also listened to the audiobooks for A Darker Shade of Magic and the Everyday Angel collection, which I like those, but not as much. I think the Cassidy Blake trilogy, it is one narrator again, and I think she just does a brilliant job. She does so many different voices, and she does accents, and I absolutely loved it. And especially in the last book, there was like the bad guy, she did this terrifying voice. Like, it was so incredibly creepy, and I was just like so impressed. I just thoroughly enjoyed listening to them. And again, kind of like An Ember in the Ashes, those are ones that I honestly could have just listened to because they're just so captivating. And they're also really short because they're middle grades. They're like 5 hours long, and so like you can speed them up. They're like 2.5 hours. So it's a really fun, quick read and an amazing narrator. Cassidy Blake trilogy follows a girl called Cassidy who had a near-death experience, and now she has one foot in like the world of the living and one foot in the world of the dead, basically meaning she can see ghosts and she can cross the veil. And then this also gets her in a lot of trouble. Her parents are making a ghost hunting show, and she goes to some of the most haunted places on earth, which, as you can imagine, for someone who can see the dead, causes some problems. So the next book I'm going to talk about is Nimona by Noelle Stevenson. Again, this is one that I recommend you read it physically while listening. It's just an amazing experience. So this one is actually a graphic novel, and not many graphic novels have audiobooks, but this one, it is not only full cast, which I know a lot of people really love full cast audiobooks. That actually doesn't bother me too much. I don't care if it's one narrator or many, as long as the one narrator can do lots of voices. But it's full cast, and it's also filled with effects. So it's just absolutely mind-blowing. But you can't just listen to the audiobook by itself because you wouldn't understand the story fully, because it's a graphic novel. You have to look at the pictures. You're listening to the story and they're talking, and then there's like a crashing sound, and you wouldn't know that, you know, she's dropped something unless you're looking at the pages. So I think this is absolutely incredible. I don't think I would have loved it as much if I just read it physically. I mean, I think I still would have enjoyed it, but putting on that audiobook beside it was just a great decision on my part. I think it's one of the best audiobooks. Again, it's on SCRIBD, so if you have SCRIBD and you have that graphic novel, even if you read it before, I would totally recommend putting the two on, because it's just so much more of a fun experience. And I guess I would have never thought about that. I never would have thought, oh my god, they should make audiobooks for graphic novels. I never would have thought about that until I listened to Nimona. And it's kind of a fantasy one. It follows this like evil villain, and basically Nimona comes to him and is like, hey, I want to be your sidekick. And the two of them have some very chaotic moments between them, and it's just really lovely. It's a really lovely story anyway, and I think the audiobook just makes it 10 times better. And then the final one that I'm going to talk about is All Boys Aren't Blue by George M. Johnson, and this is a memoir which details their life as they grow up in America, Black and queer, and it was a really touching story. I really loved it, and they narrated it themselves, and I think that's what makes it really special. I always hear people say, oh, if an author is narrating their own stuff, whether it's a novel or a memoir, that's always the best way because they know how it's supposed to be told. And I think I definitely agree with that. I know a lot of people say like Elizabeth Acevedo, she narrates her own books, and I haven't read any of those because they're not on SCRIBD, but I do really want to. But again, I feel like that it's the same for this. Okay, it's not told in verse or anything. It's just their story, and they know how it's supposed to be told. They know what points to emphasize. They know when to put emotion in. They don't even have to think about what parts are to put emotion in. It's all completely natural, and it's just them telling you their life story. And I think you can't help but be captivated and be drawn in and listen to their words. And I think it's a very important story anyway for just everyone to read. And I'm really glad that I just completely picked it up on a whim. I had seen a couple of people mention it, and it was just on SCRIBD, and I was like, I'm looking for something to listen to. And it was like pretty short, so I just put it on, and I really did enjoy it. and I would definitely recommend it. And that's all. It wasn't the longest video, it's a pretty short one, but I just wanted to kind of give you some recommendations of audiobooks. Maybe if you're scared to check them out. I definitely was. Well, not so much scared. I just was like, why would anyone want to listen to audiobooks? But I actually listened to audiobooks when I was younger. I remember I listened to like The Secret Garden and like, what's the one with the railway? There's some story that has a train in it. But I listened to like those kind of children's classics. I remember we had them on like CD. I listened to them growing up, and then like from like, I don't know, maybe like 8 onwards, I was like, audiobooks, who would want to listen to an audiobook? Just read it yourself. Which, by the way, is completely wrong, and I know that now. And audiobook reading is reading. Just before anyone says it. It is, okay? It was just completely by chance. I heard basically the entire internet being like, oh my god, the best way to read Illuminate is to put on the audiobook and read along. And I did that, and I was just blown away. Again, that's the one that has like full audio, like has effects and all of that. And it really, I was like, maybe audiobooks aren't that bad. Though I will say, like, I read the rest of that trilogy without audiobook, and like it was also fine that way. So I don't actually get that one as much. I think what really changed it was when I read Assassin's Apprentice. I was like, this is genius. I was like, this makes it so much better. Let me know what your favorite audiobooks are. Like, recommend me some. I'm always interested in hearing other people's thoughts. So thank you guys so much for watching. I do hope you enjoyed. If you did, subscribe, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye!